Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
Alright, so basically, don't back your truck up into your garage with your door half open while you're looking the other way. Alright, thanks for watching. Okay, so yeah. I done goofed, and I tweaked my door and put some minor scuffs and chips in the paint. Though the bruises to my ego were probably worse.
Hiya, how you crash into stationary object going less than 1 mile an hour?
But still, how am I gonna fix this? Well, I'm not looking to spend either the time or the money to go to a body shop for a full respray of the door to try and blend it, which you just know isn't gonna look right, isn't gonna look exactly correct like it matches. And well, because it's expensive, and I was also supposed to be on the road already for my cross-country road trip. I'm already a week behind. So time is of the essence, money is a factor, and of course, I like to do things myself. And I don't like people telling me that I can't or that I shouldn't do something myself. So, given the opportunity, I'm gonna try. So with that being said, let's go over to the truck and take a look at the damage. What's up, guys? Here in my garage.
Just bought this new Lamborghini here.
So this is literally right in the garage door from where this all happened. So let me turn the camera around and I'll go over a brief explanation of what all the damage is. And then we'll talk about what I'm gonna do about it. Okay, so first, the door you can see closes. That was not the case when this first happened over there. The door did not close, and my reflex to try and close it was wrong, because by doing so, the door was sitting low, obviously, and as a result, this part of the door struck the striker and dented it slightly. Is that anything more than cosmetic? No, but nonetheless, if this ever happens to you, whatever you do not try and slam the door, or even try and close the door lightly until you've verified how it lines up with the striker, because chances are even a minor nudge of the door is going to cause an alignment issue. And certainly if you get one of those situations where someone, gets out of the car or truck when it's not in park and then it rolls backwards and strikes something and bends the door backwards, definitely in a situation like that, you probably don't want to try and close it. As far as damage on this side of the door, that's where most of the paint damage occurred. You can see I got lucky. It's all along the edge here. So if you know anything about touch-up paint, you know that it never looks great. Because even with a great application of touch-up paint where you don't brush it on, but you clean the area and you kind of lay it in a bead, it's still gonna look visible. The nice thing about it being on the edge is the visibility that's gonna be limited. The only other spot there was actual damage was down here. You can see it wore through, and it's at least down to the primer, in some areas down to the bare aluminum. That's not even a big deal because that's actually on the inside of the door. So when the door is closed, that's not even gonna be visible. If we go to the front here, this is where it's gonna be a little trickier. You can see when the door first got bent, or the hinge rather, it wouldn't even close without binding up right here. And so that's what you're seeing. It was grinding against the fender, and as a result, the paint on the door lost the battle. And so there's both some damage out here and then on the inner edge. The reason the door even closes now, although not very well, but it does close, is because after that happened, I spent the next 3.5 hours messing with the hinges and adjusting them to get to this position. Basically, I loosened the hinge bolts on the bottom hinge and shifted it as far forward as I could, because my thought was the door was now sitting like this, causing an issue with interfacing with the striker, and it was hitting there. So I figured we just have to move it back. And because all the force was applied on the lower part of the door, my thought was probably the upper hinge didn't move much, but the bottom one did. And that seemed to help. The door kind of closed like it is now. And then I kind of screwed up. I spent the next hour and a half messing with the upper hinge, thinking I needed to move that as well. And all that did was kind of throw off my adjustments. So then I had to work backwards and get that one back to where it was before. And here's where we are now. The reason I couldn't get it perfect or fully functional again or fully aligned is because the bottom hinge only has, the holes only have so much adjustment, but the damage to the actual sheet metal, or I guess sheet aluminum of the body, is such that there was so much more movement that it's greater than the adjustability built in to the bottom hinge. Of course, that's not the end of the world, and you'll see when we get into my plans for what we're gonna do. Now, let's just take a quick look at the alignment of the door. On first glance, you might not notice anything, but I'm actually noticing that on camera, it's much more apparent than it is to my eye. So you can see the gap for the door between where the B-pillar is, it gets much wider the closer you get down to the bottom, which is showing again that the door is still tilted like this. Now, once I tilt it back, I may need to also adjust that upper hinge. You know, that's not out of the question, but the first priority is gonna be getting that at least properly aligned. So the door is sitting properly vertical. But that's not the only problem, because even if we adjust for that, and so the striker lines up and everything's good there, we still have another problem. You can see the door is sticking out, like the fender is now proud of the door. I can tell you for a fact, since I was going like a quarter of a mile an hour, I did not hit the fender.
I did not hit her.
Nothing got shoved that far forward. There's no damage to the fender. So that's where the door should be properly aligned to. But you can see it's not. It's actually sitting inset, and the door is fully closed. So that means that the actual body got shoved in where the hinge is as well. And that's where the other adjustment we're gonna need to do is find a way to pull that hinge back out. So let's go over what I'm gonna try and do to fix this. All right, so here's some of the stuff that you're gonna want to try and do this repair. One, you need the color matched touch-up paint for your car or truck. In this case, my truck is ice silver blue metallic, and that is paint code GP. So that's what I have here. Now I don't have them here, but you're also gonna wanna have a syringe and the non-sharp needles so that you can properly apply your touch-up paint instead of brushing it on with the brush that's included in there. The next thing you're gonna need is some alignment shims. You can buy these on Amazon. Again, all this stuff will be linked in the description below. This is gonna help us get that lower hinge to protrude the proper amount, to hopefully remove that weird offset that you now see. And then for aligning the door, pulling the door this way more to kind of level it, we're gonna widen the mounting holes on that bottom hinge. And for that, I'm gonna be using some Dremel tungsten carbide bits, and we'll get into that later. Also, you're gonna wanna have some alcohol, or you could also use mineral spirits, and some shop towels, and of course, copious amounts of clean microfiber towels, not just for cleaning and prepping all your surfaces when you're gonna do touch-up paint, but for propping up the door when you have to remove it from the truck. Some vehicles, if you have the right tools, you can get to the hinge bolts when the door is on. But for me, with the tools I have, I can't access all of the hinge bolts with the door on. One of the two hinge bolts on the bottom hinge is inaccessible to me with the door on, so I had to remove it. But if you can access all of the bolts on your vehicle's hinges, then you probably don't have to pull the door off. So with that being said, let's get started. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna tackle is doing the touch-up paint on these edges. Now, in a perfect world, I would actually say get the alignment and everything fixed first, and then you can have as much time as you want to take care of the touch-up paint, and there's no risk of messing up your touch-up paint with more friction damage. However, for me, I don't have much time today, and from experience, I just know that that hinge and door alignment situation is gonna be one of those, oh, I could totally do that in like 20 minutes, and then it takes like 4 hours. So instead, I'm gonna take care of this, because both this damage and then also the damage on the lower part of the door, this occurred due to impact with the door frame of the garage. So it wasn't due to friction with another surface on the truck. So it's highly unlikely that this is going to get damaged during the alignment process. So I'm comfortable taking care of this now. And then it'll be one less thing I have to do once I get the door aligned. After that, the only real touch-up I'm going to have to take care of is down by the fender door interface area. I didn't include this earlier, but you also want some masking tape. So what we're going to do is we're just going to mask off this area real quick on the side. Again, we're not spraying anything, so you don't need anything crazy. But you want to make sure that what you're doing is limited to the area you want to work on. And it doesn't have to be perfect. We're just trying to make sure that, you know, we don't get any paint runs or anything crazy going on to the good paint around it. And then we'll do the same for the damage on the bottom of the door as well. I actually do want to bring you guys in too. I didn't even notice this. This is my first time getting this low to see the damage down here. It does extend to the outside of the door. I guess you could say the only saving grace here is that this is a very low part of the door that's really only visible if you're basically kneeling down to look at the truck. Standing up, this area is almost not even visible because that's where the sheet metal of the door is already bending around to kind of face downward. So it's going to complicate things a little bit being at this this angle, but it's not going to be a problem. This is still something totally addressable. I'm by no means an expert at this. While I did detail professionally for many years, I did not do a lot of touch-up jobs, so I make no claims at being an expert at that. One of the guys on YouTube that has excellent tutorials on how to do this is Larry Cosilla over at Ammo NYC Detailing. I will leave a link in the description for his guide on, you know, the best possible case for getting the best possible results with touch-up. Something that he says that I will echo here is that touch-up will never look as good as proper paint. So if you're looking for it to look like it never got hit or it never got scratched or never got chipped, then you need to get it repainted and blended with the surrounding area. But being that these are very unique small areas, this touch-up job, if done correctly, has the potential to look nearly invisible to the naked eye. So let's start by just cleaning the area. We're going to take our isopropyl alcohol. We're going to get some on our cloth here. And then we're going to clean the affected area very well. Again, once we're putting paint in here, you know, we can't re-clean the area, so we're going to want to make sure that there's no oils or grease in there. Next, we're going to want to use some sort of abrasion to remove any loose particles or corrosion or paint from the area. If you got one of these touch-up paint pens, it's going to come with an abrasive tip at the top that'll allow you to kind of sand that area. That's actually what I'm going to use. However, if you don't have one of these, or yours is beat up or really grungy or really dirty, or for whatever reason just isn't optimal, you can buy these online. I will leave a link below for that as well. Now, it's going to be hard to see. I don't know if the camera's going to focus, but you basically want to make sure that you're abrading the whole area and specifically making sure that there's no like surface contamination or loose particles of primer or paint in there, because loose particles of anything is going to lead to a very poor bond for your base coat and eventually your clear on top of it for your touch-up, and it's not going to look good at best, and at worst eventually it's going to flake off. So that's what we're trying to do here. You can see that there's little pieces coming off. So some of them, when they come off really easily, you're actually pulling off pieces of little flecks of paint that were already chipped off but kind of just hanging on by a thread. Yeah, you want to get rid of all of that, because once we put the touch-up on there, we want it to bond to either very secure base coat, primer, or even maybe some clear that's left over, or we want it to bond to bare aluminum in this case, or in your case, maybe bare steel. After you do that, come back with your isopropyl cloth here, and give it another wipe just to remove any possible particles, because even though you loosen them, you now want to make sure you remove them so that they are no longer present. Okay, we'll come back one last time with the abrasive and just check down here. If you have one, use a magnifying glass. It'll definitely help you see if there's any areas that you missed. You can see I'm following along with the angle that some of this damage occurred, because I want to get in there to really scuff up some of those surfaces to give something for the touch-up paint to bond to as well. And again, depending on what surface your door impacted, in this case, I think it was the outer fascia of the building is some sort of concrete faux stone composite type material. Some of that could have gotten embedded in the paint or even the aluminum of the door, and you want to make sure that's removed. Okay, we'll come back one final time with our isopropyl here. Just make sure we really clean that up. And that's looking a lot better, as you can see. And I'm wearing gloves, but if you run your fingernail along this, you shouldn't feel any loose particles or anything. If you can come along here and flake things off with your fingernail, you got to keep cleaning because there's too much loose material. Let me go ahead and show you the next tool we're going to use. Because for this, the needle application method might not work best because it might apply too much at one time. Being a vertical surface, it might lead to runs. So let me show you what I'm going to use. All right, guys, so here's what I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using these toothpicks. Now, toothpicks are nice because they'll allow us to get a good bead of the paint. Now, toothpicks are nice because they'll give us a fine point. They'll let us get a good bead of the paint, but they won't be like a syringe where there's a potential to over apply and get too much coming out. Now, if you can, I would say find plastic toothpicks that maybe won't have fibers or whatever, but if you're using regular toothpicks like I am, like wooden toothpicks, just make sure that you clean them thoroughly first. Don't use isopropyl because it'll soak into the toothpick. Just make sure that it's fully clean and there's no loose fibers on it. For this next step, what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your paint pen, open up the brush section. Once you have a drop of paint on your toothpick, you're going to lay it down into the area. And you can see that I'm bringing it up just to fill in the area. And then we're gonna have it follow this path all the way down as well. And you're gonna run it back up because it's gonna wanna run a bit. So like, this is why the syringe is a terrible idea on an area like this. And then once it's kind of set in place, you wanna just stop touching it. Because once it starts to skin up, if you're still messing with it, once it starts to develop a skin, you are gonna get very obvious sort of brush strokes in it. So all I did there was to just get it all the way to the edge, and I'm not gonna touch it again. We're just gonna leave it. Even if it's a little thicker at the bottom and you need to apply more at the top, that's what the next extra layers are. You're gonna apply multiple layers of this base coat first, but we're gonna let this one cure. While we're waiting for that one to cure and dry a bit, let's go ahead and take a look at the one on the bottom of the door. This is gonna be the trickier one to address, so let's see what we're gonna have to do there. Okay, so I don't know how well I'm gonna be able to film this just because of the angle that we're gonna be working at, but we're gonna first clean the section just like we did with the top one with some isopropyl in our shop towel here. And we're gonna make sure we get that underside because there is obviously damage there as well. Next, we're once again gonna use our friction tip and we're gonna clean the affected area. And I can see some of this over here on this side of the scrape is loose paint, and loose primer. So we're gonna make sure we pull all of this off with our friction tip here. Get some of the edge as well. work the underside as well. This is the area I'm actually most concerned about making sure I prep properly, because I can tell there's a lot of loose paint here. I can feel it. Yes, that is a terrible sound, I know. And it might be necessary, even if there are sections where you can look at it and almost say, well, it doesn't look that bad. If it looks like there's loose paint there, scrape it with the friction tool. Because what you don't want to have happen is, well, it looks okay, I won't really do much there. And then it comes off later, and it can cause corrosion or a host of other problems. I'm gonna wipe it down again with our isopropyl shop towel, so we can get an idea of what we've removed and what we've got left. All right, so let's go back again. Clean up the area on the bottom a little bit more. And again, you can run your finger over here and really get a feel for what's loose and what's not. Now, obviously, you don't want to scrape paint that isn't loose, but if there's any loose paint or primer, you want to get rid of that. Best chance of your repair being permanent. Now, obviously, none of this is going to matter as much if you plan on getting proper body work and paint work done. But if you're like me and going to hopefully make this a permanent repair, you want to make sure that this is done correctly. All right, guys, let's take a look at what we got here. So for the top, as you can see, very well cleaned. And the same goes for the bottom as well. Now, those little white flecks that you see, that isn't actually contamination. That's just the bare aluminum kind of coming through there. But basically, we've prepped all the areas. The main areas we're going to lay our touch-up is going to be down here, as well as in that little spot there, and then obviously along here as well. So let's get to that. I'm gonna get the camera back mounted up so you guys can see. It's gonna be a little tough to show the bottom section, but at least with the top, you should be able to see what I'm doing. Okay, we got our toothpick here. And we're gonna try and lay our bead down just along there. And then we're gonna get up top as well. Now we're gonna let that sit. Resist the urge to try and brush it more, like I said before. All right, so now we got this section done. We're gonna let this dry, and while this is curing, we're gonna take another look up top and see if we can't do that lower section. So up top here, earlier we addressed this section. We still have this section to do. So let's go ahead and take care of that. All right, so as you can see, got the paint laid in there, and we're gonna let that set up. Now, it's tricky when doing any sort of painting on vertical surfaces for touch-up because it's very easy to get runs. So a little goes a long way, and you just wanna go slow. You'd be better off doing multiple layers or multiple coats, if you wanna call it that, but doing less per coat than trying to get it done in one attempt and then having runs everywhere. And while we're waiting for that, let's take a quick look at the upper section. Now, we might be able to leave just another bead at the top here, another layer. Let's again come down. Allow it to just sort of run, and then don't touch it. Now let's go back down to the bottom section and see how that came out. When we take a look down here, you can see there's a little spot we missed, but that's fine. We'll address that with the next coat. And underneath,
Looks like we got a little bit of a run there. We may have to wet sand that. So I was able to straighten out it a bit. It is going to run a little bit, just the nature of being on the bottom of the door, but
be careful when you're working on surfaces like this. To save you guys a little headache, I'm gonna do a couple more layers on each section, and then I'll come back when it's time to talk about either sanding or doing the clear. All right guys, so I got it done. I didn't show this step, but I also did apply the clear. For the clear, in my experience, the foam applicator brush that they include actually works quite well at getting a pretty decent application, as long as you dab it. Don't make brush strokes, just kind of dab it along, and make sure you do it quickly so that basically the surface tension of the cohesion rather of the clear when it's fully liquid allows it to lay out really flat and nice. So let's see what it looks like. So up here, you can see that's what it looks like along here, those two sections. If we come down here, there were a couple sections I didn't actually film because I didn't even notice. That's how minor they were. But I did correct them, and you can see, you can barely even tell they're there. I'm looking at them because I can see with my naked eye. One of the spots was here, and then another one was here. You can kind of see this one if you get really close, but it's pretty good. It's almost invisible. If we look down here, again along this seam, I mean, look at that. Look, it's not perfect, but it's pretty damn good.
here's where it's a little rough on the bottom. I mean, you can kind of see it's not the neatest looking thing in the world. But if I really felt so inclined, I could always come back and wet sand this and kind of get it to lay flatter. But honestly, in that position, you can't even see that. Like, I'm not gonna close the door fully yet because I wanna let this properly dry. But you can see, like, I have to come down all the way here even to see that. If you're at standard height, standing and looking at the truck, you're not even gonna see that. The real tricky part for a touch-up is gonna be down here in the corner, and we're gonna address that later. But now that we got this done, now I'm not gonna be able to work on it today, but for you guys, it's gonna be a split second. In the next clip, we're gonna get into the alignment process and the shimming process to get the door properly positioned again before we address that final spot of touch-up. All right, guys, so now that we got the door off, as you can see, I have the lower hinge here. You can kind of see how these adjustment holes work. There's not exactly a lot of adjustment room. I mean, these are the bolts, and they go in here. There's a little bit of wiggle room, but what we're gonna have to do is widen these holes in this direction to give us a little bit more play. And I just have the door wedged right now so that it doesn't fall over. And obviously the sides there protected so it doesn't scrape on the fender. But I'll be back once I get these adjustment holes done. All right, guys, so I've been using the Dremel with this cutting bit here, and I got the holes widened up just a little bit. It's not pretty, but you can see that I'm going based off of the original mounting position. So you can see this one was biased more towards the top, so that's why I'm widening it more towards the top left quadrant. And this one was kind of more centered, so I'm widening it in this direction. So now I'm gonna go ahead and do a test fit, and once I get the door on there, I'll show you guys what it looks like. But I predict there's gonna be a little bit of trial and error here. All right, guys, so sorry to not give you more footage because it is difficult to film and do these things at the same time and not block the view even if I have it on a tripod. But I've got one of the bolts tightened down just because it's difficult for me to tighten the one in front, or basically impossible with the door on. But with those holes widened, we'll take a look here. The door closes with zero force required. It used to be that I'd have to kind of push it to close it, even though I had it a little bit better aligned before. And now you can also see that gap where the B-pillar is from the front door to the rear door. It's pretty close. It still gets a little bit narrower at the top, but it's a lot better. So what I'm gonna do is widen those holes just a little bit more, adjust it a little bit more, and then at that point, we'll be able to address the issue here with the door being inset a bit with the shims.
So I'll check back in with you guys once I have this finally all lined up, and hopefully I can show you a little bit better exactly what I'm doing. All right guys, so as you can see, I took this back off because we're gonna need to widen these holes just a little bit more, but we're pretty close. So again, now I got my tripod set up so you can see. Cutting bit, and it might work better if you had a vise, but you could totally do this by hand. And like I said before, because I can see the original position of the washers and therefore where the bolts were centered, this one was pretty close to in the center line, as you can see, which is why I'm widening pretty close to this direction. However, this one, you can see it was biased. But you can see this one was biased heavily in this direction, and because of the impact, that likely caused even more movement in that direction. So that's why I'm widening it more in this direction. But honestly, given how little adjustment is needed for this, general widening in this direction would probably serve you just fine. So I'm gonna finish this up, and I'll get back when I can to show you the next step, which is gonna be applying paint to these surfaces to prevent rust. Okay, so now that we got this done, gonna just blow this off, get some of that, get all those shavings off of there. Now obviously, we've now got a bit of a problem. We've got exposed steel here. So what we're gonna have to do is paint these surfaces. Now, in the beginning of the video, I had said the only kind of paint you were gonna need is the color match touch-up paint for your vehicle, but I guess I kind of lied to you because you will also need some sort of paint to cover these surfaces. Now, if you can find a color match touch-up paint or spray paint for your vehicle, that's great. That's what I would use. In my case, it's really hard to find this particular color, and I haven't seen it anywhere in a spray can. So instead, I'm just gonna use some silver metallic paint. It's pretty close. I mean, you can see the entire hinge isn't even painted exactly the same color, so that's fine. All right, guys, so I decided I want to actually mask off this hinge because most of the surfaces on here are fine, and there's no reason to get overspray on these painted surfaces, especially up here. So once I finish masking this off, we'll take it outside and get it painted so that we just cover the areas where we actually damage the paint. And because it's dark outside, you're not gonna be able to see this, so I'm gonna show you now what paint I'm gonna be using. I'm gonna be using this primer. It's a Stop Rust Rust-Oleum primer. Probably unnecessary since the steel is bare and we just took the paint off, so there is no rust, but it'll help. And just a metallic silver paint. This particular one is titanium silver. I bet you this would match the iconic silver color, the silver lightning color, but basically the silver that they use on the F-150s, even better. But since mine is technically silver blue metallic, ice silver blue metallic, this won't look identical, but since we're masking off 90% of this thing, it's not gonna matter. So let me go ahead and finish masking this off, and then we'll take this outside and get it sprayed. All right, I got it completely masked off, and something I didn't bring up earlier, but you should mask off the bushing as well. So make sure you do that. You don't want a bunch of paint up on the brass bushing there. All right, so let me go ahead and take this outside now, and we'll get this sprayed. All right, guys, so we got this thing painted, and now I just gotta wait 2 hours for it to be safe to handle. I'm not worried about letting it cure all the way before I work with it, because again, all I did this paint for is to just make sure that the insides of the holes I widened don't end up with some corrosion. So while we're waiting for this to cure, I'm also gonna paint some shims. Now these are actually galvanized steel, so they probably won't rust, but it's still a good idea to paint these just so we don't get any rust streaks from behind the hinge when rainwater and stuff gets down in there. So I'm gonna get these done, and then I'll jump back in once we're ready to fit this and check how many shims we're gonna need. Just to play it safe, I'm gonna paint several shims, and I'll paint a couple of different sizes too. That way, you know, depending on what we need, we'll already be ready to go. All right, so just before I take these outside to spray paint them, you can see what I've got here. This is my setup for trying to get these covered. I didn't have a great option, so I'm just using a hand truck and some zip ties to hang all the shims so that I can get 360-degree coverage on them. So once I get these sprayed, I'll bring them back inside, and once I give them enough time to dry, we'll get everything back together and try and line the door back up. All right, guys, so while we're waiting for the paint on the shims and the hinge to dry, we're gonna adjust the upper hinge and just pull it out a little bit further. So even though I don't think this upper hinge got shoved too hard, it is still a little bit closer than I think it was before. So all we need to do is pull this out a fraction of an inch, and we should be good. So these bolts in here, there are 3 of them. They're 13 mil. You're gonna come in here with your ratchet and loosen them up. And you don't have to get them super loose. We just want to get them loose enough to where we can shift this hinge forward. So I think I need to get these a little bit looser. All right, now that we got this loosened up, let's inch it forward. So I just inched it forward like imperceptibly. I don't even think you guys could see that, but I could. And then we're going to immediately tighten it again. Now I'm going to need to probably block the camera because I got to hold this in position to make sure I don't shift my adjustment. All right. Now I've got these tightened down. And there we go. All right, guys, so this has had enough time to dry, so I'm just pulling the masking tape off. And if it looks funny, it's because it is, but that's because these sections that I painted actually didn't have any paint from the factory, at least not the body color paint, rather. They were just kind of painted a black finish, so that's what we're doing now. Just pull it off, and as you can see, the areas we cared about are painted, which is inside the holes. So now we got to get this hinge back in position. So you're going to line up your bolts. Now, in addition to getting this in position, now that we're going to be mounting it up to see the alignment, I'm also going to put some shims in there. I don't actually know what size I need yet, so I'm just going with the sort of middle of the road size. These are, I believe, 1/16. If these are too much, I have much smaller ones. And I have ones that go down to 1/64. So we're gonna start with these. Get the shims in behind the hinge. Line them up. And I didn't want to have to trim these, but you totally can to make sure that they fit completely without anything protruding. So you can see that we are going to get some protrusion. So we want to line these up so that we get minimal protrusion here. It's probably going to be right about there. I apologize if this is a little bit difficult to see, but it is very hard. All right, guys, sorry for cutting right there, but it's really difficult to do this all while having a tripod right in the way. But now we've got it in position. I ended up moving the shims. You can see they're just sitting vertically now. This might prove to be a bit of a problem if I can't get them both to sit flat, but I think we should be okay because they are sitting flat, at least from what I can tell right now. So I just got to get these bolts kind of snugged up. We're not going to be able to get them completely snugged up until we know exactly where we want them. But because I can't access one of these bolts, this front one, when the door is on, we're going to leave that one slightly loose, and then we're going to snug the rearward one up completely. And that, combined with a tight upper hinge, is enough to at least check alignment. All right, we've got it tightened up there, at least the rear bolt. And I can't film this part because it truly is way too difficult to do with a camera, but I'm gonna get the door back on and in position, and as soon as I get the door back on, I'll turn the camera back on and I can show you what the alignment looks like. All right, I've got the door back on. You can see I haven't even put the bolts back in to hold it in position or the bolt for the door check there. So let me just hand thread these in just so that we don't have the door fall off, because that would be a disaster. And I'll tighten these into position along with the door check. Don't do what I did. I've forgotten to tighten the door check, and you can see it scuffed up the paint there. Again, that's gonna be some touch-up work I'm gonna do once I get everything together and aligned, but just keep that in mind. If anytime you're gonna close this door, even to check alignment or anything, you gotta put the door check back. Otherwise, you're gonna have a bad time. Let's tighten that up. All right, that's good enough. I feel like we might need to do a little adjustment on the bottom there, but let's check the alignment. I'm gonna pull these cloths out. Make sure there's nothing in the door. So far, so good. No rubbing there. But we are sitting low. So I don't know if you can see that. We're sitting low on the bottom there. And we're sitting low here. So I need to pull this out more. So I'm gonna go ahead and loosen that bolt, adjust this a little further forward, and then I'll check back in with you. All right, so I finally got the door back on, and I got the bottom hinge aligned a little better. And then I don't know if you can see, the door closes, and when it's closed, the gap is pretty even, both in the front and the back. It's a little bit narrower there, so I'm gonna see if there's any more adjustment room there. And it's not quite perfect, because you can see it's rubbing a little bit. It's not perfectly centered on the striker. So what I'm gonna do is I think I have a little bit more room to play with in there. I'm gonna bring it forward, and we're gonna check this again. All right, guys, so after much tribulation, this is the result. We are in perfect alignment, as you can see right here at the B-pillar, and here with the fender. We have a very consistent gap, and the door no longer rubs on the bottom there, as you can see, and the alignment is perfect on close. It doesn't rub at all on the striker, and you can see I can just let it go from right here, and the door closes perfectly. So now that you see the results, I wanna show you guys exactly what's involved in doing it, because I will tell you right now, it's not something that I would do by yourself. I would try and get some help, and I would also make sure you block off an entire day if you've never done this before, because it's gonna be a lot of trial and error, back and forth, checking the alignment. That's just how it is. So let me go ahead and show you exactly what's involved. All right, so this is the way that I did it. And like I said, you're gonna want a partner or a helper or someone to help you with this. So if you look down here, you can see this stack of pallets. Now you could use pretty much anything. I happen to have some spare pallets, so this made it easy. If you don't, you could use cushions, cardboard that you stacked up, but you need some pretty sturdy surface to support the weight of the door, because when you remove the door, you're gonna need something underneath. In addition, I lined the pallets with some microfiber cloths to obviously protect the paint on the bottom of the door. And then when you remove the door, you're gonna wanna make sure that you stick some cloths along here, along the side of the door, the gap between the fender and the door. Because when you remove the door, there is a good possibility that it might tilt this way, and you're gonna get metal on metal action here, and that's gonna damage the paint on the exterior skin of your door. That's gonna be a bad time. Lastly, once you have the door off, to avoid having to have someone hold the door the whole time, you're gonna want heavy objects on either side that are padded to keep the door from tilting. So I happen to have one of these Delta Pro 3s, extra batteries. So that's what we have here. Obviously, you don't need to have a very expensive expansion battery for a power station for this. Any heavy object will do. And then on the other side, my backpack's pretty heavy. And so I just wedged the door between the battery and the backpack. And then that would allow me enough room to get inside and work on the hinges. And like I said, it's gonna be a trial and error thing. You're gonna have to check and recheck. If you have an instance like I did where most of the damage was to one hinge, start with the hinge that you think is bad first and try and get that adjusted all the way out. Even if both were tweaked, whichever one is worse, you wanna correct that one first. Because if you try and correct that one, but it's not quite where you want that side of the door, and then you want to touch the top one, you're going to get yourself completely mixed up. So don't make the mistake I did the first time. Take care of the bottom hinge first, or whichever hinge you think is more damaged. Obviously, if they're both damaged, then you kind of just have to work with what you got. But I'll link in the description an excellent auto body repair guy's video. I'm blanking on his name, but he made an excellent video on understanding door alignment, and you should just watch his video on his X tape technique. It just shows you so you can better visualize exactly how moving each hinge will ultimately orient the alignment of the door. So with that being said, now that was clearly the hardest part. The last thing we got to do is take care of some of the touch-up paint. All right guys, so the final things we got to take care of are the touch-up on this section right here. Also on the inner edge of the fender. I can show you that once I open the door. And one spot right here where I kind of messed up. I didn't remember that I had the door check unbolted, and I tried to close the door, and well, a little scrape action there. So we'll take care of that down there, and then I will show you, over here. The inner edge, it's gonna be very difficult to actually get the camera in there, but let's see, yeah. So that edge of the fender right there, it's a little scraped up, we'll take care of that. Now, being that it's gonna be exceptionally difficult for me to get the camera in there and really show you what I'm doing, and since I kinda already showed you the technique up here and down here, I'm gonna just finish that off camera, and then I'll come back to show you the final results of everything.